Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today I want to talk about this blog that came out and the ISO-5 requirements that have gotten everyone very worked up. I want to tell you, first of all, what my thoughts are on it, but also tell you what the conversations have been like with the devs, because they're not behind a NDA or anything, and I have made my points pretty forcefully to them. But I also want to talk to you, assuming that they don't change their mind, which I'm hopeful they will, or at least because they seem to. If we complain enough, they do change their mind. But if they don't, how we can plan around this as best as possible, how you can reduce the damage to yourself and your alliance. So, what people are worked up about is this blog that came out just yesterday that it does two different things. So first of all, this has drawn less criticism, but now to unlock Adam Warlock, who's the new legendary, I will have a separate video about Adam Warlock. So that's not the focus of this one, but to get him at 6 or 7 stars, you need to have really high levels of ISO. So for 5 stars, you need him at ISO 3, which I don't think is going to upset too many people, but things get exponentially more expensive for ISO 4 and ISO 5, particularly ISO 5. And so, fortunately, I think most people who are at the 7 star level for an unlock, who have, if you already have all the X Factor at 7 stars and Jubilee at 7 stars, you're probably like some massive whale end game player anyway, and you can figure this out for yourself. But this is still making even those people upset. And I do think this changes, sets a precedent in the game, right? Where now ISO is a requirement to get everything. And similarly, they've done it, and this has generated a lot more anger on the Doom raids, right? So now there's a lot of good news about Doom raid, where they say, okay, we're getting rid of this first strike thing. Now we're going to make the raid easier. And then what they're going to do is they're going to have a difficulty slider. And by the way, this part of it is actually good. It's helps everyone, which is, there's a lot of alliances right now that have actually been breaking up because of the Doom raid. There's a Gold 4 alliance that I give a lot of advice and help to, where there's literally like a split within the alliance with some of the more powerful accounts are like, we want to run Doom raid, and then other people are saying they can't even clear a single node, and it's creating division, and alliances are breaking up. So if you have an easier version of the Doom raid, and then there's difficulty sliders, so the people who, like in my alliance, aren't finding Doom raid challenging anymore, are finding it to be a grind. We can have the challenge and they can have the easier content. I think that's a win-win. But of course, this is the real controversy here, which is that now there's ISO requirements for Doom Raid, and they said characters used in the first 5 nodes of Doom 1 will now need to be equipped with at least ISO 4. The remaining nodes require ISO 5. Now, I will tell you, this has absolutely no impact for me. But I am like the top one, tenth of 1%, I'm sure, when it comes to ISO, right? So I have probably 70 ISO 5 characters, something like that. And it's in well over 60 ISO 5 characters if you just look through my roster. And so, for me, it's no big deal. Every character I use in Doom Raid, every character I have at G14 or 15 is already up to ISO 5, and that's because I do the 50 and 100 core ISO refreshes every day, and I've bought some, not all, but some of the offers, and I've been doing that since day one on ISO. But I will tell you, even people in my alliance, and I'm in one of the biggest diamond alliances in the game, there's people in my alliance that are like, oh crap, I'm in trouble. I can't run the Doom raid. I mean, this is going to affect almost every single player in the game. There's probably several 100,000 players in the game, and I bet there's only a handful of people who this does not impact. And so I'm saying this unbiased because this doesn't impact me, but it's total BS, right? Okay, I mean, let's just be real here. I could say this as a totally unbiased person. So, what I like the lead. Here's my take on it. I mean, this is what I think's really going on here, and then I'll tell you what they said because it doesn't match what's really going on here. they're introducing this ISO blue. I was part of the play test. You can see if you go in my videos, I tell you everything that I learned from the ISO blue play test. But they're very high on ISO blue. They put a lot of time into it, and I think they expected everyone to go harder into ISO. I went hard into ISO. I actually think it really makes your characters more powerful, but most people think it's a waste, so they don't care. They're more focused on gear and levels and whatever. Fine. Well, this is essentially, in my view, a way for them to force you to buy ISO. They're basically trying to find a way to make money out of their green ISO before they make it more farmable. Because they're probably, when they add blue, they refuse to answer my questions about whether they're going to make it more farmable, green ISO more farmable, or make it easier to obtain. But I think they're basically just trying to make it so that people panic and they buy the offers and do whatever they have to do, core for more ISO energy to get their characters up in green. That's what I think is going on here, and I think it's kind of blatant because the Doom raids are already in the game. We already know how to beat the Doom raid, and what they're saying is they're going to make them easier. So everybody should be able to beat at least the easier difficulties, and really for the harder difficulties, you can figure out how to beat them. If they're harder and you need more ISO, then so be it. Okay, if you need more ISO, that's so be it. Well, my view on it, was totally different than what they said in the strike time video. So there is a strike time video by Cerebro, and I will put a link to it below so you guys can view it for yourself. But essentially, Cerebro, the Scopely community manager, is like, he had an interview with some dev, and they're like, well, actually, we need this to tune the difficulty. If we don't have this requirement, then we won't be able to figure out exactly how to make the missions difficult enough and the raids, which is total BS. It's just total BS. I mean, it sounds like such a BS excuse because they've already designed a Doom raid. It's already in the game. It is what it is. Um, and I got to tell you, the idea that they need to force us to have ISO on it to determine the difficulty is BS. And I told them that. I mean, this is the way I put it to Cerebro, and this was me trying to be polite because he said this stuff about okay, this method allows us to get even more, and there's a lot of it's just the BS, like, oh, allows us to do our testing and get it tuned right. And I said, this explanation / reasoning seemed disingenuous to me. That's my blunt feedback on that. I would respect the move more if Scopely just said they want people to invest more in ISO. That's my view of this. Disingenuous is a nice way of saying it's BS. Okay. It doesn't seem authentic to me. And Cerebro's like, no, his response essentially, no, that's not true. I had this conversation with the mission designers, and this is their actual view. They needed to determine the difficulty. It's very hard to balance without it. And so what I said is essentially, why not make it a suggestion? And if you balance it around level 3 ISO and make it a suggestion, and if they don't have the level 3 ISO, then they'll find another way to beat it. They'll spend more on gear or something, right? And what was his response? So I said, why not just design the missions as hard as you want and let the players figure out if they need ISO and how much to beat it? And his claim is, yes, that's part of the discussion. The problem is that the more open-ended it is, like that, we have to be on the conservative end and tune them to be harder than they probably should be. So what is my response? So what? They're basically saying they had a tune for a strike to be too hard. So what? Everyone's figuring it out. I mean, I'd rather just have it be harder and everyone just figure it out for themselves. I mean, if you're really into ISO like me, then great. Okay, maybe it's a little easier in a Doom raid, and if you're not into ISO, then maybe it's harder. Who cares? Like maybe you have to figure out a different combination of characters, or you have to overinvest or go hard on red stars. Whatever it is, but the point is, or raid heals. I don't know, but the point is, I think that's a much better way of doing it. So here's the thing: the amount of complaining and whining and anger and bitterness over it is insane. Everyone's angry. and venting their anger at Cerebro. So the devs hear all of our complaints. I can't promise you that they're going to do anything. I don't work for them, and I don't represent them, and I don't defend their actions. So whatever they do, they do. But I think they'll probably do something. I mean, one compromise that has been discussed that I think is reasonable would be to not have the ISO requirements for the base level of Doom Raid, but only to have it for have it scale up for higher difficulties, which at least then you could still run the Doom Raid if you are don't have the ISO, and then you can over time scale up. If you want to go to 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, you could scale it up in ISO levels from there. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But here's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about what to do if you are in this situation. If you, for example, are not able to get your characters up and they just go forward with this. Well, first of all, one thing to keep in mind with the Doom Raid guys is they said that. So this is what I would do for your alliance so you don't get screwed. They said that the first 5 nodes are going to not are only require level 4. So that's going to get you the first 2. That's the first mini section of each node plus the second section. Okay? So each one of these lanes has a different origin requirement. Okay? And so what I would do is you've got, let's say this one's bio here. So basically if there are people in your alliance who just didn't go as hard on ISO for symbiotes, you put them in this lane on the left because they'll only need to get them to ISO 4. And then the people who went hard on symbiotes and I got them to ISO 5 can go over here on this side. You see what I'm saying? So what you have to do is you're going to have to stagger your entire alliance to make sure that you have the minimum ISO commitment that's required. In other words, you only have 2/3 of the alliance needs to get their symbiotes to ISO 5. Now, the other thing I would just say for each one of the sections is you can kind of make do with some characters that you had to ISO 5 for elsewhere. So here's what I mean. It may very well be possible in the bio section to, for example, if somebody did do Black Bolt or Yo-Yo, or even, hey, they got Cull. I mean, it may very well be for these nodes that you may be able to get away with Cull plus 4 symbiotes. You see what I'm saying? Or something like that, right? Or Black, certainly you can get away with Black Bolt Yo-Yo plus 3 symbiotes, or Black Bolt plus 4, or Yo-Yo plus 4. So I guess my point is that's another option for you for some of these sections, right? Where you are not necessarily going to have the full team. But what I think it's going to take is, the other thing is you may have to do in the short run is, you may have to just have, let's say, for example, for Mutant, you may just need to have 6 people. There's going to need to be essentially 6 people in your alliance to bring Axemen or X Factor up to level 5 ISO. In other words, there's one lane where Mutant's early, so you only need them up to level 4. But all you really need is per section, you can have 2 people who get their Axemen up to level 5. They can get you through that mutant section, and then maybe you have another person specialized in symbiotes. I think that's what it's going to take to get to work around this requirement. That's the best I can come up with, and I'm just doing that to help you find a solution to a stupid problem. Obviously, the problems with Scopely, obviously it's BS, but I'm just trying to do my best to help you. And a lot of people have been asking me about ISO farming guide. I'm going to also just give you a few quick tips now, okay? If you really do want to catch up at ISO, my suggestion is to do the refreshes on the ISO energy. I think that's the best deal. It's over here. You can at least do the 50s. I do the 100s every day. Okay, and because first of all, you also get gear and gold, so you get something else out of it, which is good. The other thing I would just say is when you are farming, really keep a note of which classes you need So, for example, controller, there are so many good controllers in the game, so I farm that heavily every single day. Whereas if support, I don't farm at all. Like I just get support like randomly as I do other stuff, but these are the supporters I have up. I will just tell you that like Merc Lieutenant I did just for DD4 because I was racing, um, and I would view Doctor Strange as a questionable upgrade. And so really, you don't even need all of this, right? There's not that many great supports that you really need at this point. So what I would just say to you is, you want to really think through which classes you need and you farm based on class, okay? And so the other thing I tend to do is I try to look ahead to what is coming in the game. I mean, fortunately, Adam Warlock is a support, which is easier. Most people have that sitting around. But, we are going to have two brawlers that we're going to need to bring up, in Nebula and Gamora. So I try to look ahead to know what I'm farming. The other thing I would just say with ISO is when I am farming ISO, what I do is I look like, so for Brawler here, I click, and then what I do every day is I look and see where I'm at on the left and see, okay, I need 50 of these. I need 51 of those, but I don't need these. So I don't farm this because I have too many. You have to try to balance them out. And then you have to figure out, do you need ions or do you need the pieces? So this costs 12 and you get more pieces per energy. This one, you get more ions. You get way more ions, but you get fewer pieces per energy. So you just have to kind of do a balance of what you have. I know for free-to-play players who I've had a lot of discussions with about this, it's more on the ion side, so you'll have to farm the 24s. You end up with fewer pieces. Frankly, guys, the system sucks. It's really a pay-to-win sort of system right now. But that is the most. I'm just trying to help you do the most you can with the system that they have. I've made your concerns. I made my concerns known. I think it's BS, and I told him so repeatedly, directly, and it is what it is. All right, guys. Wish I had better news for you today, but that's the bottom line on the ISO change. And hey, no one liked this video. But if you dislike the changes, how about clicking that like button, subscribing to the channel, checking out my Twitch stream below, and also my Discord as well.